She put the mug of coffee on the counter without looking at me. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Not the coffee itself. Not what I found out later. Just that small moment. My daughter of 31 years. And she couldn't look me in the eye while she handed me a cup of coffee. I noticed. I didn't say anything. I just wrapped my hands around the mug and watched her move to the other side of the kitchen. Already pulling out her phone. Already somewhere else entirely. That was a Tuesday in March. The azaleas in the front yard were just starting to come up. I remember because I'd been meaning to trim them back all winter and kept putting it off. Small things like that stick with you when everything else starts to fall apart. My name is not important. What I do for a living is not important either. Not really. But I'll tell you anyway because it explains something about how all of this happened. I'm a retired electrician. 34 years with the same union, same territory, same crew, more or less. I retired at 62 2 years ago, and the transition was harder than I expected. My wife, Barbara, passed 8 years before that. Pancreatic cancer, very fast, the way that one always is. And after she was gone, the work was the thing that kept me moving. When the work stopped, I had to find other reasons to get out of bed. My daughter, Renee, became one of those reasons. She moved back in with me 14 months before that Tuesday in March. Said she needed to reset after a bad breakup. Needed to save money. Needed to figure out her next chapter. Those were her words. Next chapter. Renee always had a way with phrases that sounded purposeful without meaning anything specific. I didn't mind. I want to be honest about that. I genuinely didn't mind having her home. The house was too quiet. Barbara's absence was in every room, and Renee filled some of that silence just by being there, cooking sometimes, leaving her shoes by the door, watching her shows too loud from the living room. I liked it. I liked knowing there was someone else in the house when I woke up at 2 in the morning and couldn't get back to sleep. What I didn't know, not at first, was what she was doing on her phone. Renee had always been online in the way that people her age are online. Constantly, reflexively, in a way I never fully understood. She had accounts on platforms I couldn't name, posted things I couldn't follow, had followers I couldn't imagine caring about the details of the stranger's life. I didn't pay attention to it. That was her world, not mine. The first sign I missed was the camera. She bought a ring light and set it up in the corner of her bedroom sometime in October, about 2 months after she moved back in. I saw it through the open door and asked what it was for. She said she'd been doing a little content creation, just something casual, nothing serious. I nodded. I didn't ask any more questions. That was my first mistake. The second sign I missed was the change in how she talked about me. It started small. Comments at dinner like, "You seem tired, Dad. Are you sleeping okay?" And, "You really should see a doctor about that cough." I didn't have a notable cough. I slept fine, but she asked these questions with a particular kind of worried expression, the kind that a caring daughter would have. And I thought at the time that she was just adjusting to being home again, noticing things about me she'd missed while she was away. I thought it was tenderness. I was wrong about what it was. The third sign, the one I finally couldn't ignore, came in February, about 6 weeks before that Tuesday with the coffee. My neighbor Walter came over to return a drill he'd borrowed. Walter is in his late 60s, recently widowed himself, the kind of man who shows up exactly when he said he would and leaves exactly when he should. We stood in the driveway for a few minutes talking about the weather and his son's new job in Charlotte. And then he got this expression I didn't quite understand. Hesitant. Like he was deciding something. He said, "I don't want to get in the middle of anything. It's none of my business." I told him to go ahead. He said his granddaughter, she's 24, uses the internet the way people her age do, had shown him a video. A short clip, maybe 2 minutes. A young woman talking to a camera in a soft, worried voice about her father, an older man, recently retired, isolated since her mother passed, who'd been having health problems he was keeping to himself, who might not be able to afford proper care, who was too proud to ask for help. Walter looked at me. "It sounded like you," he said, and the girl looked like Renee. I thanked him. I went back inside. I sat down at the kitchen table, and I stayed there for a long time. I want to tell you what that felt like, because I think it matters. It wasn't anger, not at first. It was something quieter and worse than anger. It was the specific feeling of understanding something you'd been almost understanding for months, without letting yourself complete the thought. Like when you're half asleep and you know there's something wrong, but your brain won't quite let you put it into words. I sat at that table, and I let my brain put it into words. My daughter was using me as content. She was building a story around me, a sad story, a sympathetic story, and she was monetizing it. She was monetizing my loneliness and Barbara's absence and my retirement and every small sign of aging that she'd been cataloging with that worried expression over the past several months. I didn't confront her that night. I waited. I'm 64 years old. I spent 34 years in a trade where if you reacted to every problem the moment you noticed it, you'd make the problem worse. You learn to assess first. You learn to understand what you're actually dealing with before you touch anything. So I assessed. I asked my nephew Owen, who works in digital marketing in Atlanta, to help me find what was out there. Owen is 38 and patient with me about technology in a way that doesn't make me feel stupid, which I appreciate. Over the course of about 2 weeks, we found 3 separate accounts, one on TikTok with a little under 4,000 followers, one on Instagram with about 6,000, and one with a longer video format that had the most traction. A fundraising angle. The fundraising one was the one that turned my stomach. The account described a daughter caring for her aging father, a retired blue-collar worker, recently widowed, declining health, fixed income. There was language about rising costs of medication. There was language about home care. There was a link to a fundraising page on a platform I recognized, one of the major ones people use for medical expenses and emergencies. The goal was set at $18,000. At the point Owen found it, she had raised $4,300. $4,300 from strangers. People who read those words. Declining health, fixed income, rising costs, and felt something and opened their wallets. Real people. Some of them probably not doing great financially themselves. She had raised that money in my name, with my face, or something close enough to it. From people who thought they were helping a real sick man. I won't tell you I handled all of this perfectly. There was a night in late February when I stood outside her bedroom door for about 5 minutes. I could hear her in there talking to her camera in that soft, worried voice, and I stood there with my hand raised like I was going to knock, and I just didn't. I went back to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed that's been too big for one person for 8 years, and I thought about Barbara, which I try not to do after 10 o'clock because it makes sleep impossible. I thought about what Barbara would say. She would say, "Don't do anything stupid." She would say, "Think about what you actually want to happen." She would say, "There's a difference between what feels satisfying in the moment and what's actually right." So I thought about what I actually wanted. I didn't want to blow up my daughter's life in a moment of rage, but I also didn't want to pretend this hadn't happened. And I didn't want those $4,300 to stay with her. That money was taken from good people under false pretenses. That was the part I couldn't get past. I called a lawyer, a woman I found through the state bar referral service, specializing in fraud and digital misrepresentation. Her name was not cheap, but she was clear. She walked me through what Renee had done, what it could be classified as, what my options were. She also told me something I hadn't thought about. The fundraising platform had a fraud reporting mechanism. Documented evidence submitted through proper channels could result in the funds being frozen and potentially returned to donors. That changed my thinking considerably. I went back to Owen. I asked him to help me document everything: screenshots, archived links, transaction records, wherever we could access them, dates and amounts. Owen worked on this over 3 or 4 evenings after his own workday, and he was thorough in the way that young people who grew up with technology could be thorough in ways I never could have managed alone. While Owen worked, I kept living in the house with Renee. I ate breakfast across from her. I asked about her day. I watched her look at me with that practiced worry, and I kept my face completely neutral because 34 years of union work teaches you to negotiate. And the first rule of negotiation is that you never show what you know before you're ready. She made dinner twice that week. A pasta dish on Wednesday, soup on Saturday. I ate everything she put in front of me without tasting much of it. The coffee on Tuesday was different. I want to be precise here because I know how this sounds, and I don't want to overclaim. I'm not certain what she put in that mug. I noticed, after about 20 minutes, that I felt unusually heavy. Not sick, not in pain, just weighted. The way you feel sometimes when you've taken cold medication during the day. It could have been a coincidence. It could have been tiredness. I was not sleeping well. But she did not look at me when she handed it to me. And Renee, whatever else I can say about her, has always been someone who looks people in the eye. I set the mug down on the counter after a few sips. I told her I wasn't in the mood for coffee. She watched me set it down, and something moved across her face very fast. Relief, I think, though I couldn't be completely sure. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, and I thought about what I decided, and I decided it was time. The next morning, I called Owen. I told him I was ready. He told me he had everything we needed and that he'd been ready for a week. He asked if I was okay. I told him I was. I called the lawyer and we submitted the fraud report to the fundraising platform with Owen's full documentation. The lawyer had also drafted a letter to Renee. Not threatening, not dramatic, just precise. What we knew. What we had documented. What the next steps would be if she did not respond appropriately. Then I waited at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I had made myself. And when Renee came downstairs at 9:15, I handed her the letter. She read it standing up. She had her hand on the back of a chair. About halfway through, she sat down. By the end, she was very still. The conversation that followed was the hardest hour of my life since the hospital waiting room 8 years ago. I'm not going to reproduce it in detail because some things don't need to be shared. And because some of what she said was so desperate and sad that I don't want to define her by it, I will tell you that she cried, and that the crying was real. Not the practiced softness she used for her camera, but something uncontrolled and genuine that reminded me she was still the person who used to fall asleep in the back seat of the car on long drives home from her grandmother's. I told her I wasn't doing this to punish her. I told her the people who donated that money deserved to have it back. I told her she needed to cooperate with whatever the platform required. She asked me what would happen to her. I said I didn't know, and that was true. I said that depended largely on what she did next. What she did next was, I think, the best I could have hoped for. She called the platform herself. She spoke to the lawyer directly, which I had not expected. She agreed to full cooperation with the refund process. The $4,300 was frozen within 48 hours, and the process of returning it to donors was initiated, which I understand takes time, but which the platform's fraud team confirmed was underway. She moved out 12 days later. Her cousin helped her. I watched them carry boxes to the car from the front porch, and I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I might feel. I didn't feel much of anything for a while. The azaleas needed trimming. I trimmed them. Walter came by the following week with a casserole his daughter had made. Chicken and rice. Covered in foil, enough for 4 meals. He didn't ask any questions. He just handed it over and stood on the porch for a while, and we talked about nothing in particular. I told him I owed him one. He said he didn't see it that way. I've thought a lot since then about what I actually want people to take from this. Not about Renee specifically. That's between us, and it's ongoing, and nothing about a relationship like that is ever fully resolved. But about the broader thing, about those $4,300. The people who gave that money, I've thought about them. People who saw a story about a sick old man and felt something human, who opened an app and typed in a credit card number because they wanted someone they'd never meet to be okay. That impulse is not a flaw. That impulse is, I think, one of the better things about people. The problem is that it can be packaged and sold by someone who knows exactly how to package it. I don't know what the solution is. I'm 64, I'm a retired electrician, I'm not a policy person, but I will say this. If you see a fundraiser for someone's medical care, and you feel moved by it, take 10 minutes first. Look for the person's name somewhere that isn't the fundraiser itself. Look for inconsistencies in the story, the details that a real situation would have, and that a constructed one sometimes misses. Look at how long the account has been active, how many other posts exist, whether the story has verifiable anchors, and if something feels slightly off, if the narrative is a little too clean, the emotional beats a little too precisely placed, it might be worth pausing before you give. I'm not saying don't give. I'm saying look first. The house is quiet again. Different kind of quiet now. I've been thinking about going back to Walter's suggestion from before all of this happened. He mentioned a woodworking group that meets on Thursday evenings at the community center in town. Retired guys mostly, some working, a couple of them I know vaguely from the neighborhood. I told him I'd think about it. I've been thinking about it. The azaleas came in fine this year. Barbara always said I had a good hand with them, which was generous because she was the one who knew anything about plants. But they came in fine. They're out there now, right now, doing whatever azaleas do in April in North Carolina. And every morning I take my coffee out and I look at them for a while before I do anything else. That part, at least, is still mine. I've been sitting with this for a while now, long enough that the anger is mostly settled and what's left is something harder to name. Not quite sadness, not quite peace, somewhere in between the two. What I keep coming back to is the sequence of it. Not what Renee did, exactly, but how it was able to happen at all. And I think the honest answer is that it happened because I stopped paying attention. Not in a dramatic way. I wasn't neglectful. I wasn't absent. I was right there in the same house, eating breakfast across from her, asking about her day. But I wasn't really watching. I decided, somewhere along the way, that I already knew who she was, and so I stopped looking closely. That's the thing about people you love. You build a picture of them early and you carry it forward, and sometimes the picture is accurate and sometimes it isn't anymore, and you don't always notice when it stops being accurate. I carried a picture of Renee as a difficult kid who'd grown into a complicated adult, but who was, underneath everything, someone I could trust. That picture was out of date. I just didn't know it. There's a kind of wisdom, I think, that only comes from being wrong about something important. Not the wisdom you read about or hear secondhand, the kind you earn by sitting at your kitchen table at 2 a.m. and understanding, very specifically, where your own thinking failed you. I was wrong about what Renee was capable of. I was wrong about what moving back home actually meant. And I was wrong, for a while, to let the discomfort of suspicion talk me out of looking harder. The moment I stopped letting it talk me out of looking, the moment I called Walter back and said, "Go ahead, tell me," that's when things started to move in the right direction. Not because confronting hard things makes them go away. They don't. But because you cannot respond correctly to something you refuse to see clearly. Owen helped me see it clearly. The documentation, the accounts, the amounts, numbers on a screen that made abstract suspicion into something concrete and undeniable. I'm grateful to him for that. Gratitude, by the way, is something I've been trying to practice more deliberately. Since all of this, it's easy to focus on the thing that went wrong and forget the things that held. Walter showed up. Owen showed up. The lawyer was straight with me. The platform did what it was supposed to do. $4,300 went back to the people it came from. That matters to me more than most of the rest of it. I've thought about those donors more than I've thought about Renee, honestly. People who saw a story and felt something real. That impulse to open your wallet for a stranger in trouble is not a weakness. Don't let anyone tell you it is. The problem is not the impulse. The problem is that the impulse can be engineered if someone knows how to engineer it. And more people know how to engineer it now than ever before. So the thing I'd want anyone to take from this is not about family, exactly. And it's not about daughters or fathers or complicated relationships. It's simpler than that. It's just this. Look before you give. Not because generosity is wrong. Because generosity is worth protecting. Yours and everyone else's. 10 minutes of looking is not distrust, it's care. Care for the people who actually need help, and care for the impulse in yourself that wants to provide it. The azaleas are doing well this year. That's not a metaphor. They're just doing well.